The banners of House Stark and House Tully rippled together above River Run's crimson-tinged ramparts, as morning's first light filtered through slender slits in a cloud-strewn sky. Dew still clung to the reeds along the red fork, glazing every blade with silver, and the river itself murmured with secret confidence, unfazed by lords or wars or promises of revenge. Robb Stark stood on a rain-damp stone balcony over the water, gauntleted hands resting on the moss-specked merlon, and drew a steadying breath that smelled of trout scales, damp wool, and something subtler, the faint perfume that clung to the Frey girl who would soon become his wife. He imagined winter wolves howling far to the north, and he imagined his father's voice advising caution, yet he felt less alone than he had in months. Every choice a king makes opens one road and bars 10 others. He had closed the road that led to Jeannie Westerling when he dismissed temptation and bent instead toward duty. "Keep the river," Catelyn had whispered to him nights before. "And the river keeps the north." The river's quiet applause washed beneath him now, as if affirming the wisdom of the match. Below, in the courtyard, men-at-arms adjusted hauberks, and new-minted guardsmen from the twins drilled under Sir Stevron's stern eye. The Freys had arrived, 30 flagons of hippocras in tow, 40 musicians, and 24 maidens, bedecked in pale blue and silver gowns that reminded Robb of quiet lakes before dawn. Rosalind Frey, chosen for him by Lord Walder with the satisfied snap of a bony finger, stood among them like a single clear note in a clamorous court. Younger than Robb by a year, soft-voiced, and with eyes limpid as meltwater around the edges of ice, she carried a hush wherever she stepped. Squires whispered that Lord Walder had offered a less comely girl first, and that Catelyn's steely stare had altered the old man's generosity. But Robb set gossip aside. Marriages sewed kingdoms the way careful stitches closed wounds, and scars mattered less than the beating heart beneath. Catelyn watched as the Frey procession wound through River Run's gates, her own heart clenching between gratitude and dread. Gratitude, because her son had averted the ancient insult of breaking his word. Dread, because Walder Frey's late beneficence felt like a lion shifting to show softer fur over hidden claws. She clasped her hands within the sleeves of a dark blue gown trimmed in fox fur, and surveyed the ambling figure of the Lord of the Crossing. Walder's skin was parchment hung over sticks, but the sly curve of his thin lips betrayed a mind that had not withered. "He will count every courtesy twice," she murmured to Sir Brynden Blackfish at her side, "and send us the bill thrice." Yet even Blackfish could only shrug. Alliances were coins in war, and only fools refused them when offered. The wedding itself took place in River Run's Godswood, beneath an ancient oak whose bark wore the memory of 1,000 summers. Candles flickered in glass globes strung from branches, their trembling lights painting loops of gold on the air. The benches were crowded, Tully guards, Frey men, Karstark still glowering in the aftermath of Lord Rickard's execution, and Rachin Umber who boomed laughter at nothing to fill the silences. The words were spoken solemnly by a septon with trembling hands, and Robb slid a pale blue ribbon studded with tiny pearls around Rosalind's wrist, while she bound his with the dear wolf-gray silken cord presented by her sisters. In that binding, the river was bridged. The twins would stand firm, Lord Walder vowed aloud, and his voice for once did not crack. Musicians played a lilting reel, Rosalind's cheeks flushed, and Robb lifted her veil to reveal tears shining like early rain on summer wheat. He kissed her gently, and in that breath decided, without fully knowing, that he could love her. Feasting followed until moonrise. Barrels of brown ale from the twins emptied in torrents. River Run cellars surrendered their best reds, and Lord Edmure, relieved to relinquish his own impending nuptials for a night, bestowed quips on every man who could still stand. Arya's absence haunted Catelyn with each song. The girl phantom danced beyond every archway. Yet the hall pulsed with guarded hope. Gray wind padded between trestle tables, his muzzle twitching at roasted boar glazed with honey, but he stayed close to Robb's chair, an embodiment of Winterfell's quiet vigilance amid river merriment. Even Roose Bolton's eyes, pale and unreadable, softened at the musky scents of spiced sausages and sweet cream custards. Only Lord Karstark sipped his wine like a man drinking ashes, for 2 sons slain at Jaime Lannister's hands could not be sweetened by the marriage of a distant cousin to a Frey. when candles guttered low, and pipes surrendered to the hoarse call of ravens in the pre-dawn dark. Robb led Rosalind to the bridal chamber prepared by Riverrun's maesters. He paused outside, turning to see Grey Wind settle guard at the door. "I fear the wolf more than the husband," Rosalind teased, voice wobbling. Robb pressed his forehead to hers and whispered the ancient words of the North. "Winter lives in all things, but fire may yet warm them." And in the hush that followed, he felt something mend inside him, as though the specter of his father nodded from a snow-lit crypt far away. Dawn of the third day saw banners struck and baggage trains lurching across Riverrun's drawbridge. Lord Walder departed first, satisfied that the Frey name now clung to northern glory. He left behind 500 men-at-arms, a token force to march south with Robb. Catelyn watched them while ravens rustled overhead, carrying missives of the new alliance to every holdfast from White Harbor to Last Hearth. Words would soon wing east to King's Landing as well, where Tywin Lannister would ponder the sudden reinforcement of his enemy. She could almost smell the shift in the game. Alliances were scents on the wind, and the lion sniffed them quicker than most. In the depths of Harrenhal's melted towers, Tywin received the raven and considered it by candlelight. Frey bride," he murmured, fingers drumming against the blackened oak of a war table. Kevan studied him anxiously, but Tywin's expression betrayed nothing beyond the tiniest tightening around his cold green eyes. He knew Walder well, knew the old trickster lusted for status more than gold, and had counted on Robb Stark's broken promise as a lever to pry the twins into Lannister hands. Now that lever had splintered. "Send Ser Adam with 500 horse to the Trident," Tywin ordered at last. "Tell him to watch the crossings and wait. A river may rise under the moon, but it will fall ere dawn." He dismissed the messenger, then turned to his map, gaze lingering on the jagged letters, spelling Moat Cailin. To break a wolf, one cages him from his den. Yet even cages rust when rivers flood. Back at Riverrun, Robb held council in a tower solar, while Rosalind explored the castle's rose garden with her new sisters-in-law. Maps sprawled across the lamentable ink-smelling sharp in the warm air. "The Kingslayer's still our prize," Greatjon boomed. "And every day he breathes is a dagger." But Roose Bolton countered with measured calm. "Jaime Lannister may yet serve us better alive if our hostages dwindle. We have your sisters to consider, your grace." Robb accepted both points, but pushed them aside for today. "We ride north to Winterfell first," he declared. "We will retake our home, free the Ironborn's prize from Theon's folly, and then sweep south again with the river behind us. Frey men at our side, and Carhold's grief tempered by victory." He glanced to Lord Stark, whose weathered face remained etched by silent storms. Yet the man dipped his chin. Before the host set forth, Catelyn sought out Rosalind by the river. The girl knelt at the water's edge, letting cool current play over her fingertips. She startled when Lady Stark approached, but Catelyn eased beside her, skirts gathering dampness. "My lady," Rosalind murmured. "Call me Cat," Catelyn replied, surprising them both. "You've married a king. The North is harsh, but its people are fiercely loyal. Give them kindness and they will shield you from every wind." Rosalind's gaze drifted across the mirrored sky and the river. "I fear I won't be enough for him. He is brave and wild as the wolf on his banner." Catelyn laid a hand on the girl's wrist, steady and warm. "Robb needs someone who reminds him he is still a boy beneath the crown. That will be enough." In Rosalind's hesitant smile, she saw Sansa as she might have been, safe and unafraid. The march began under a vault of mottled skies. Drums beat a slow, purposeful cadence, and new-forged silver bridles jingled as Frey and Stark cavalry merged into a single snaking column. At its head rode Robb and Rosalind, twin standards flaring. Grey direwolf, twins argent on blue. Grey Wind trotted before them, nose high, savoring scents of pollen, dust and blood yet unshed. Knights found the host camped along the King's Road, tents clustering like mushrooms under ancient oaks. In lamplit pavilions, Robb and his generals plotted the retaking of Winterfell and the path beyond. Rosalind listened when aloud, quiet as snowfall, absorbing the names of holdfasts and listening to the men's humor shift from rough jest to wary respect, when she offered gentle counsel about river supply lines and the dispositions of Frey bargemen who could ferry grain upstream faster than wagons could roll. Little by little, she became more than a bride. She became a trusted ear. North of the Neck, word reached them that Ramsay Snow had taken Winterfell from Theon and then put the Ironborn to the sword. The fires still smoldered, ravens croaked about murdered millers' boys, and Winterfell's towers lay blackened husks. The news struck Robb like a mailed fist. That night, in the privacy of his tent, he sank to his knees before his queen and pressed his brow to her hands. "I swore to save my brothers," he whispered. "Now their graves may already be cold." Rosalind kissed his hair and spoke softly of duty's heavy chain. "You carry their memory, my love," she murmured. "Carry it forward, not downward." Her words steadied him, and he rose with new resolve. Bolton's bastard would answer for every torch lit against Stark Stone. As the host neared Moat Cailin, mists rolled in from Salt Marsh and Peat Bog, veiling sun and moon alike. The ruins loomed. 3 ancient towers gutted in the age of the first men. Narrow causeways snaking through endless sodden morass. Ironborn still clutched the towers, but their numbers had withered. Robb ordered trumpets silenced. He advanced under cover of morning fog, leading a picked band of Northmen and Freys across hidden dikes, mapped by crannogmen loyal to Howland Reed. Grey wind broke from his side, grey shadow on grey mist, and the wolves of House Manderly raised their voices in low growls. By noon the eastern tower fell, its palisades overrun by Frey pikemen, whose father had once schemed to betray the wolf, the twist not lost on any man present. The western tower held longer, until Greatjon smashed its gate with a battering ram christened Breaker of Oaths. The center tower capitulated at dusk. Robb Stark raised the direwolf above the highest parapet, and below it the twins' sigil as well. The message would fly like an arrow through every hall in Westeros. The young wolf's alliance held. That night fires glowed red across the broken stones of Moat Cailin, while ravens flapped into darkness bearing tidings of victory. Robb summoned emissaries from House Reed, House Manderly, and even the hill clans of the north to his council. The plan was audacious. Bolton's bastard held Winterfell, but he held it with mercenaries and fear, not love. Northmen would rally to their king once they knew he marched beneath the old god's gaze. Roose Bolton himself, should loyalty prove stronger than ambition, might yet play the part of disgraced father silencing a wayward son. Robb's council debated long into the moonless hours, quills scratching like crickets. Rosalind sat beside her husband, adding a calm presence that cooled escalating tempers. When Lord Karstark challenged Bolton to single combat for old grievances, it was Rosalind who poured the wine and diffused the tension by gently invoking the memory of the dead Karstark sons, honoring their sacrifice while steering the discussion away from renewed bloodshed. South of the Neck, Tywin Lannister struck a different tone. Ravens brought word that Robb Stark held Moat Cailin, that Freys had ridden at his side, that the North looked poised to unite. "The wolf consolidates," Kevin observed. But Tywin saw deeper strands. "Walder Frey's loyalty is skin deep," he said. "Strip one layer, and you find profit beneath." He dispatched letters sealed with golden wax to the twins. Honeyed promises, veiled threats, assurances that the Frey's newfound honor need not conflict with Lannister gold. Let Walder weigh Wolf's gratitude against Lion's treasure. Tywin knew the North's fury could not be quenched in open field alone. Alliances were broken by suspicion as easily as swords. Yet the twins, for now, remained true. Walder Frey gloated at his hearth, raking thin hands over crackling logs, while his grandsons boasted of the part Frey spears had played in seizing the moat. Somewhere amid the noise, a skinny girl slipped unheard among servants. Gray eyes bright with hidden fire. Arya Stark, who had escaped Harrenhal's horrors to find herself scullion at the crossing. She heard talk of her brother's triumph and clutched the knowledge to her chest, a talisman against the ache of exile. At night she recited her list, though fewer names than before. Polliver and Wheeze were dead. Others yet lived. One by one, she promised them the darkness. Back at Moat Cailin, autumn's first frost kissed the marsh grass silver. Robb stood atop the shattered gatehouse, dusk painting the horizon in bruised purples. Beside him, his mother lifted her face to the chill wind. "When we ride for Winterfell," she said. "We ride to a broken home. We will rebuild it," he answered. Rosalind emerged from the stairwell. Cheeks pink from cold, fur-lined cloak rippling. She slipped her arm through his, and together they looked north where black pine-clad ridges waited like shadowed teeth. Somewhere beyond those ridges, Ramsay's snow flaunted stark banners over charred halls, and the north bled. Robb felt the pulse of vengeance in his palm where he gripped the tower's cold stone. Yet vengeance alone could not feed widows or ward off winter's hungry maw. He needed grain from the Trident's fertile banks, smiths from White Harbor, masons from Barrowton, and he needed the Freys to ferry them all upriver before the first snows sealed the neck. That very night, ravens landed bearing dire news from the south. Stannis Baratheon had been broken upon the Blackwater. Joffrey Baratheon still held the Iron Throne, and the Reach had rallied to the Lion's banner. The war would not end with the taking of Winterfell. It would grow colder, hungrier, more desperate. Catelyn read the scroll by firelight, its words dancing like red ants across her vision. She saw Robb's shoulders tense as he absorbed the tidings, saw him turn to face the men who called him king. "We finish one war at a time," he said quietly. "The North first." In his gaze burned a resolve steadier than any he had shown before. Rosalind felt it like the heat of a brand and resolved herself to match it. Days later, as frost sharpened into true cold, the host marched again, leaving Frey bargemen to fortify Moat Cailin and tend the wounded. Gray wind led the vanguard, paws thudding over crusting mud. Behind him rolled siege towers of fresh-hewn pine, their wheels oiled with rendered boar fat to prevent freezing. The road north wound through forests, stripped to skeletal birch and copper-dark pine. Ravens tracked them overhead, black motes against pale skies. Snow flurried one dawn. Swirling into eddies about the horses' hooves, but Robb's spirits rose with the chill. Winter was the season of the Northmen. At Barrowton, Lady Dustin received Robb in the shadow of her squat stone keep. She eyed Rosalind with thinly veiled disdain. Frey alliances meant little to a woman whose husband's bones still lay captive in Winterfell thanks to Ned Stark's quest south years past. Yet even she offered troops, for Ramsay's cruelty threatened all. Maester Tyrs confirmed rumors of flayed smallfolk nailed to Winterfell's broken gates. Robb's wrath grew white-hot. He swore by the Hearttree's face that no man would leave Ramsay's dungeons alive, save to feel the headsman's blade. The last pass before Winterfell lay through pine forests slick with rime. Scouts reported Bolton banners flying beside the flayed man. Traders had replaced Stark direwolves on the ramparts. Night fell silent, save for the muffled crunch of snow. Robb made camp within sight of his childhood home, now a black silhouette against star-pricked sky. He walked among sleeping soldiers, pausing to pull blankets higher over lads snoring by dying fires. When he returned to his tent, Rosalind awaited, candles flickering. She drew him close, smoothing snow from his hair. "Tomorrow we reclaim what is yours," she whispered. "What is ours," he corrected. At sunrise, horns wailed like direwolves mourning the dead. The siege engines rolled forward, Frey archers knocking arrows beside Umbers and Mormonts. Snow shrouded the field, swirling ghosts hiding the movements of crannogmen, slipping through hidden postern tunnels, mapped decades earlier. Ramsay's men shouted insults, but fear edged their voices. The battle for Winterfell had begun, and though the outcome remained clouded by smoke and snow, one truth dawned clear over ramparts and frozen moat alike. The North had come home united, its strength bound by a marriage knot and tempered in loss. What songs would one day carry across mead halls and minstrels' tours would depend on the deeds yet to unfold, on the mercy of wolves and the treachery of men, and on the quiet steel of a girl from the twins who now bore a wolf's name. The story was far from told, and the night ahead would be long, but dawn, however far, would always break beyond the walls of Winterfell. The first stone of catapult shots soared, trailing white vapor in the frigid air, and shattered against the outer curtain in a plume of snow-dusted rubble. As shards cascaded, gray wind's howl rose above the din, echoing into courtyards where it found the heart of every soul who ever called Winterfell home. In that answering thunder of voices, River Knight, Mountain Clansman, Frey Outrider, Karstark Spear, Robb Stark heard the future of the realm he would forge, a realm where broken oaths were mended, where loyalty was paid in more than blood, and where the whisper of a young queen's gentle counsel could steer giants. Beneath the roar of siege and the rattle of shields, beneath the crackling fires and the rattling breath of men bracing for death, the river kept its promise. Alliance held the flood at bay, and somewhere, under the piled snows beyond the walls, direwolf pups curled against each other, dreaming of spring. K. Snow sifted from a dull pewter sky as Winterfell's outer curtain rumbled beneath another fist of stone. The siege had settled into an icy rhythm. Daylight shattered by the crash of catapult arms, twilight haunted by flights of quarrels, midnight ruled by the whisper of scouts picking through shadowed rubble. Cold crept everywhere, knitting armor joints with frost, silvering the whiskers of grizzled veterans, stiffening even parchment maps that Robb unrolled night after night beneath the muted glow of tallow candles. Each morning he rose before the trumpets, breathing clouds of vapor that tasted of ash and pine resin, and walked the line of trenches to let men see their king treading the same crimson-mudded ground. He paused over cookfires where Frey pikemen traded coarse jokes with Manderley spearmen, over sapper pits where Crannogmen pressed oil-soaked reeds against undermined stones, over piles of broken shields, stacked like timber against the silent witness of Winterfell's weirwood, which, though hidden deep within the castle walls, seemed to stare outward with blood-red eyes no battering ram could blind. Behind the southern trebuchet, Rosalind Stark moved among the wounded with measured composure that belied the tremor in her fingers. Her blue and gray cloak bore flecks of soot, and a smear of someone else's blood darkened the hem. But her voice never wavered. Maester Luwin's replacement, a young gray-robed scholar sent from the citadel, knelt beside a Karstark archer who had taken a splintered bolt through the thigh. Rosalind steadied the man's shoulders while the maester probed for iron, whispering soft encouragement that mingled with distant wolf howls, ringing across wintry rooftops. The archer gritted teeth, but cast one shy glance at the queen. There, in that fleeting moment, Robb's marriage paid a dividend gold could never buy. Bonds forged in blood heal, faster than bonds signed in ink. Inside Winterfell, Ramsay Snow stalked ramparts slick with ice, his bastard's cloak snapping like a ragged banner. He gloated over each howl, thrown from the lines beyond the moat, savoring the fear he imagined in every throat. Yet dread skulked his own footsteps, gnawing edges of his grin. Provisions had dwindled, winter's deep bite cratered morale, and the sellswords he imagined fearless whispered of mutiny when fires burned too low. To keep obedience, he drafted grim diversions, flaying 2 ironborn deserters at dawn, and hanging the skins as crimson streamers above the gatehouse. Even the Bolton men, long inured to cruelty, avoided their captain's eye afterward. Ramsay's dog cages echoed night-long with growls hungry for carrion, and in that noise he found uneasy comfort, as though the hounds would bark warning if treachery crept closer than his shadow. Far to the south of siege lines, in a mossy clearing beyond the King's Road, Arya Stark crouched beside a half-frozen brook washing dirt from her face. She had ridden hard from the twins on a stolen gelding hardly worth the saddle, had dodged patrols wearing a ragged cloak stitched with the badge of some forgotten soldier, and had slipped through Robb's pickets by whisper of her name to a muddy-foot scout sworn still in secret service to her father's memory. Now dehydration chapped her lips, and exhaustion clamped her limbs like manacles, yet flint sparked within her dark gray eyes. She would reach her family before night closed entirely. No guard, no herald, no fanfare. Only needle at her side and the secret knowledge of every narrow place a girl could squeeze through once she breached the siege line. She trudged north beneath bristlecone pines, breath steady, reciting her list as she walked. Ramsay Snow, Ilyn Payne, Cersei Lannister. On and on, a rosary of vengeance tingling across her tongue. Robb's war council gathered each dusk in a circular command tent pitched beyond axe throw of the walls. Catelyn sat at his right, veil dusted with hoarfrost. Lord Karstark lurked like a blighted oak 3 seats away. Great John Umber filled the space with booming laughter that felt more weapon than mirth. Roose Bolton attended, pale-eyed and courteous, the lash-thin smile never venturing deep enough to reach warmth. When plans for a night assault arose, Crannogmen tunneling toward a Sally Gate rumored half-collapsed. Bolton offered precise counsel, charting guard rotations known to him from before his bastard's treason. No flicker of paternal sentiment betrayed him. After the council dismissed, Bolton lingered by the brazier where embers glowed a dull red. Catelyn approached, searching his face for any sign that the man regretted the monster he had loosed upon her children. Bolton's gaze remained impenetrable as smoked glass. If regret lived in him, it slept beneath fathoms of ice. The night infiltration began 2 bells past moonrise when clouds muffled every star. Howland Reed's green-cloaked frog-eaters slipped soundlessly through boggy fens, bellies crawling across frozen reeds that crackled only under the weight of memory. They hauled satchels of pitch-soaked rope, iron grapnels wrapped in felt, knives honed thin as dragonfly wings. Gray wind paced their flank, senses alert to scents no human nose could parse. At the same moment, inside Winterfell, a stable door eased open and a slim shape darted across a courtyard ankle-deep in snow melt. Arya hugged the wall, counting paces in her head the way Syrio had taught. 8 to the arch, 12 to the stair. Breathe, listen. Rats scuttled beneath straw, unalarmed. She thanked whatever nameless god shielded her and pressed on, knife drawn more for courage than need. At the enemy's footings, the Crannogmen found the secret sally only half filled with rubble. Remembered stories told that Benjen Stark had once used the passage for midnight hunts. Ramsay had tried sealing it but lacked the labor to finish. The frog-eaters worked stones loose, doused them in pitch, and hauled them aside. Down dark corridors they crept, reeds brushing curved ceilings, until torchlight flickered beyond. 2 Dreadfort men sprawled by a brazier arguing over dice. The taller one never saw the obsidian dagger that slid between his ribs. The second died with a croak. The Crannogmen signaled the outer lines with a silent lantern flash. Twice pause. Once, the breach hung open. Robb waited astride a great gray courser near the tree line, armor blacked to dull sheen. The signal winked. He tightened reins, heart pounding like war drums, and nodded to Lord Greyjohn. Torches flared along the trench lips, not to illuminate but to blind. Under their sudden glare, Siege ladders scuttled forth like iron-spined centipedes. Barroton masons levered forward planks across the partially frozen moat, icy water cracking in protest. Frey bowmen loosed volleys over their comrades' heads, arrows whistling through drifting snow. Within moments, chaos erupted upon Winterfell's lower walls as defenders scrambled to repel a threat they had not believed could come so fast, so silent. In the inner ward, Ramsay burst from the great hall half-dressed, rage mottling his cheeks red. He barked orders to captains even as he buckled mismatched vambraces over bare arms. A sellsword lieutenant tried to raise caution, muttering of numbers massing beyond the east tower. Ramsay whipped a dirk across the man's throat mid-sentence. Blood sprayed in a brief arc, steaming upon snow. That display cowed many, but not all. Pockets of resistance buckled as men weighed pay against peril. Ramsay sensed their doubt and drove deeper into madness, yelling promises of winter riches, of Dreadfort glory. Yet his words rang hollow against the thunder of ladders clapping stone and the howl of gray wind soaring across the battlements. Arya climbed a narrow spiral stair she remembered from childhood, the servants' tower, unused by guards. Moonlight snuck through arrow slits, striping steps with silver. She reached a door leading to the second-floor gallery overlooking the yard and pressed ear to grain. Shouting swelled below, crossbow twangs puncturing the dark. She breathed once, twice, thrust needle forward and stepped out onto the wooden gallery. Nobody saw her at first in the swirl of fight that crackled across the courtyard. Flames licked at a haycart overturned by panicked horses. She scanned for the Stark banner. There, across the yard, Grey Wind's silhouette reared on hind legs, knocking a mailed brute flat. Hope hit her like a spear of sun through winter clouds. Outside, Robb climbed the first ladder and vaulted onto the rampart, sword already flashing. Beside him, Great John roared a harsh laugh and shoulder-charged a bolter guard so hard the man flipped backwards into space. Frey spears surged behind, pushing Ramsay's troop back step by bloody step. Robb never left Rosalind's face from his mind. He fought as if every stroke shielded her across time and stone. He parried an axe swing, riposted in a blur, cut another foe low, and steered forward by instinct. When a crossbow bolt sang toward his helm, gray wind lunged, jaws snapping the projectile mid-flight. Kings and wolves move as one, the old songs claim. Men witnessing that sight gripped pikes tighter, hearts hammering with newfound zeal. Ramsay barricaded himself in the great hall, dragging hostages before the oaken doors. Lady Hornwood's young squire, 2 millers' daughters, a gray-beard stablemaster. He lined them with ropes at knife point, commanding archers to hold the dais. As crashing sounds echoed from corridors, Ramsay laughed, a high brittle sound. "Let them come," he whispered to the hostages, stroking the flat of his blade across the cheek of the youngest girl. "If the wolf wants his den, he'll pay a pound of flesh." His hounds, loosed from kennels, prowled hallway shadows, fangs wet with hunger. Smoke drifted under lintels where braziers tipped in the skirmish. Flames licked tapestries depicting ancient kings of winter. Winterfell herself seemed to writhe in memory of past burnings, Torrhen Stark kneeling to Aegon, Theon's torchlight sin. But now vengeance stalked her once more. At the collapsed Sally Gate, the Crannogmen ushered companies of Northmen into the bowels of the keep. Robb's battle standard, direwolf rampant on frost-white silk, threaded lower halls like dawn creeping through barred shutters. Lord Karstark led a vanguard of grim swords, seeking Bolton to answer for his sons. Umber axes hewed door planks, Manderly men wound horn blasts that rattled rafters. In a side corridor near the library tower, 2 Bolton spearmen tried surrender only to be cut down by a free rider whose brothers were flayed by Ramsay months earlier. Mercy in that hour found little purchase. Arya crossed the courtyard amid the swirl, unnoticed in servant rags. She saw Maester's turret ablaze, a ladder tilting downward, a Frey banner catching wind. A dead man's helmet lay half buried in slush. She scooped it up and jammed it on her dark hair, vision narrowed by dinted visor. Ahead she spotted the open door of the kennel house. Growls rolled within like thunder. That way, she sensed, lay Ramsay's lair. She darted through smoke, leapfrogging a toppled shutter, and slipped inside just as 2 mastiffs lunged at her. She whispered, "Valor Morgulus," and slammed the latch. The dog's claws scratched wood in frantic scrapes, but she was already sliding past cages toward an unlit stair ascending to the back of the Great Hall dais. Beyond the doors, Rosalind stood with Catelyn beneath Winterfell's shattered gate arch. Flanked by guards but unarmed, the 2 women exchanged one brief look. Catelyn's eyes shone with tears, both glad and fearful, as she beheld ancestral stone. Rosalind inhaled the scent of pine smoke and distant pine, and in that breath found the steel of queens she had only glimpsed in stories. "We end this cruelty," Lady Stark muttered. Rosalind nodded and touched the small steel sickle sheathed at her hip. A gift from Blackfish before the march. For cutting ropes, he had jested. They waited for the signal, 3 horn blasts. Inside the hall, Ramsay heard the first blast. Wood shuddered behind him. He raised his knife. The second blast rang. Shouts rose outside. Before the third sounded, the side door burst open and Lord Karstark stormed through, axe cleaving the skull of the first archer he met. Bolton men scrambled. Hostages screamed. Ramsay snarled a curse and dragged the miller's daughter toward the hearth, blade at her throat. Karstark advanced, but checked his swing. The girl's eyes were too like his niece's. "Back!" Ramsay shrieked. "Another step, and her life buys mine." From the dais rear stair a shadow slipped forth. Arya, helmet tilted, blade glinting slender. She scanned chaos until her gaze fixed on Ramsay's exposed flank. Needle darted forward like summer lightning, pricking flesh, just enough to draw a bead of red. Ramsay jolted, slicing the hostage's collar but not her skin. He whirled to strike this sudden foe. Arya slid beneath his slash, withdrawing into shadows. She had not meant to kill, only to distract. That heartbeat of distraction was all Robb needed. He charged through the main doors, Greatjon at his shoulder, Grey Wind a grey tempest at his heels. Ramsay barely yanked the hostage into path before Robb's sword crashed against his own. Markings blurred into clamorous steel, sparks showering across flagstones. Grey Wind leaped, but Hound sprang to intercept. Jaws clashed in a frenzy of snapping teeth. Ramsay kicked free, retreating toward hearth embers. Flames roared along the wall tapestries now, choking air with smoke. Snowflakes swirling through shattered windows hissed into steam. Above, unseen, Arya clambered the timber beams, heedless of scorching pitch that dripped from flaming rafters. She maneuvered directly above the dais where Ramsay sparred Robb blow for blow. Needle dangled in her right hand. With her left she steadied balance. Ramsay's attention locked on his kingly opponent. Perfect. Yet the duel wore longer than any had thought. Ramsay fought with vicious cunning, slashing low, feinting high, drawing small cuts on Robb's forearms. Foiled to grace, Greatjon tried to intervene, but Robb barked him back. This was a wolf's feud. Outside, the third horn blast finally sounded. Rosalind stepped through the gate onto the forecourt, seeing fire in every window frame, hearing the ring of swords and the growls of beasts. She moved forward, barely feeling snow under thin leather shoes. Guards tried to hold her, yet she slipped loose. Queen she was, and Winterfell her hall now. The voice inside her commanded presence where her husband bled. Catelyn followed fast, intercepting Rosalind at the hall doors. Smoke belched outward. They gagged but pressed on, skirts aloft. Scene inside stunned them. Banners aflame, hostages cowering, wolves and dogs locked in savage knot. Ramsay and Robb circling. Catelyn's cry might have broken Robb's focus had Rosalind not seized her mother-in-law's wrist. Trust him. Eyes never leaving her husband. Arya chose that moment. She dropped. Needle speared downward, burying to the hilt at the juncture of Ramsay's sword arm. Pain convulsed him. He wheeled just as Robb lunged, and the young wolf's longsword punched through Ramsay's leather jerkin, just beneath the breastbone. A gout of crimson spattered across the dais, hissing where it met fire. Ramsay's eyes, shock-wide, found Arya crouched behind him. Recognition flickered. "Stark," he rasped. Then Grey Wind tore free of his canine foe and clamped jaws about Ramsay's throat. The bastard of Bolton died with a wet gurgle drowned by the crackle of burning oak. See. Silence did not fall at once. Shouts still rang across battlements, but within the hall a hush like first snowfall spread. Robb yanked sword free. Chest heaving, Arya straightened, helmet dropping from her dark hair. Catelyn's gasp shattered the stillness. She stumbled forward, arms encircling her daughter, even as tears streaked soot across both faces. Greatjon whooped a victory shout. Karstark stared, grief and grim joy warring behind his eyes. Hostages sobbed, freed of ropes by Crannogman, knives. Rosalind mounted the dais and laid hand upon Robb's wrist. Their gaze met, 1,000 words unsaid between bruised smiles. Smoke thickened. Rafters groaned. "Out," Robb commanded. Men ushered survivors through side exits, while Manderley bucket lines fought flames. Snow swirling through roof gaps helped smother fire. Winterfell, ancient and stubborn, would not burn so easy. Maester Torrhen and Rosalind led wounded to the great courtyard. There, dawn's first blush found wolves and Northmen alike, staring at red-stained snow that steamed beneath gray morning sky. Wind carried scent of pine and charred cloth. Bells rang from the first keep, signaling victory. Outside the gate, lords regrouped. Roose Bolton arrived late, face unreadable, as soldiers dragged his bastard's corpse across slush toward a pyre. Robb eyed Lord Bolton, awaiting some flicker of fury or sorrow. Instead, Bolton inclined head in cool acceptance. "Justice is done," he said, words cold as midwinter ice. Stark narrowed eyes but held peace. Their true enemy lay dead. The war demanded unity. For now. Winterfell's great courtyard became triage and council chamber. Catelyn guided Arya to warm water and clean garments. The girl balked at fuss but relented when she glimpsed her reflection. Smudged black face, tear tracks cutting white. She washed while recounting the journey. Harrenhal, the twins, her escape. Catelyn listened, heart aching at horrors swallowed by her young wolf. Yet pride burned bright that Arya had struck the fatal blow. In another part of the keep, Robb convened with lords to plan next steps. Garrisoning Winterfell, repairing walls, dispatching ravens, announcing victory, and the salvation of Ned Stark's bloodline. Letters would summon Wyman Manderly's masons, Stout's carpenters, Reed's marshrunners to shore foundations before freeze deepened. That night, a feast of sorts occurred, meager yet joyous. Barley stew ladled into wooden bowls, bread black with ash, but hot, ale strong enough to banish chill. Robb rose at table's head, cloak torn but shoulders straight. He spoke not of triumph but of duty. Rebuilding, remembering the dead, forging a realm where no child need fear the flayed man. He named Rosalind his heart's queen before all, praised Arya as the valiant daughter of Winterfell, thanked every house present for blood spilled. Men roared approval, tankards clanged. Snow drifted through gaps overhead but seemed gentle now, blessing rather than curse. Rosalind retired early, exhaustion weighing her bones. She knelt in the quiet of Catelyn's old solar, hands folded. She prayed first for the hostages freed, then for those slain, even Ramsay, whose soul she begged the Seven to judge swiftly, so that living might heal. When Robb joined her, he found strength in her poise. He knelt beside, their fingers entwining, two threads knotted tight. Days stretched. Winterfell breathed again. Smoke lifted from forges as smiths hammered spearheads from molten iron. Deerwolves. Only one, Grey Wind, but his howls filled vacant kennels with life. Patrolled ramparts. Arya trained daily in the yard, sparring with crannogmen who matched speed for speed. Onlookers cheered when she flicked wooden blades from seasoned soldiers' grips. Catelyn oversaw repairs, memory guiding workers to secret corridors needing shoring, to cellars where grain stores once nestled. Rosalind, for her part, reorganized granaries, scheduled shipments from the twins, corresponded with Maester Ways at Seaguard for wheat delivery. Her quill scraped parchment late into the night. When Robb found her thus, he brushed stray hair from her eyes and marveled that love could bloom amid charred stone. News radiated outward. In White Harbor, Lord Wyman raised feast in Robb's honor, though bread and salt tradition reminded him caution. At the twins, Walder Frey perched on high seat, cackling that his seed now warmed the king's bed, but gold letters from Tywin still glinted on his table. Unanswered, tempting. In King's Landing, Cersei scowled as ravens perched along towers, black wings whispering that the wolf yet roamed. She ordered spies northward, yet winter storms grounded them often as not. Tywin continued playing his hidden game, dispatching envoys north disguised as merchants, pockets bulging with promises of pardon for any lord discontent with the Stark ascendancy. Most found their coin refused. Some did not. Seeds of discord seldom die in frozen soil, merely slumber. Robb did not allow Winterfell's restoration to slow war. He summoned banners anew. Barroton, Tallheart, Mormont, Serwyn. They came, hearts buoyed by reclaimed home. Victories knit thread by thread into tapestry of hope. Yet Robb understood hope alone would not topple the Iron Throne. He convened a gathering at the Great Hall, roof half repaired, banners freshly dyed. To outline a plan. Strike south come spring, seize Moat Cailin firmly, march through the riverlands bolstered by Frey barges, link with Brynden Tully and King's Road partisans, then break west to the crossroads where Tywin's grain flowed. Cut supply, starve lion. Cheers greeted the vision, though wary eyes noted winter's long teeth still lengthening. On the eve of first snowfall heavy enough to blanket fields, Catelyn walked the godswood with Arya. Ice-crusted leaves snapped beneath boots. Heart trees' face glowed wan in torchlight. Catelyn whispered that Ned's spirit surely watched. Arya placed palm against red bark, eyes closed, and murmured names she would pursue still. Catelyn wished she could wash those names away as easily as blood and stream water. But children grow by scars as much as smiles. Elsewhere in the keep, Rosalind prepared a small chamber for the wounded children of smallfolk, turning old armory into infirmary. She arranged straw mattresses, cloth bandages, simple toys carved by stable boys. When Robb stopped by, she shyly revealed her plan. He kissed her brow, pride swelling. "You make the North stronger than any sword, my love." She blushed, then whispered a secret. Her moontime had not come. Robb's eyes widened, heart pounding anew. "Aye." He breathed. She nodded, tentative, but hopeful. Amid winter's chill, the promise of new life warmed every stone around them. Spring, however, lay months away, and war seldom waits for gentle weather. Scouts soon reported Lannister outriders massing near the Trident, Tywin's banner riding in person. Robb assembled high command. Debate raged over whether to strike preemptively or fortify the neck. Voices clashed, Karstark urging swift vengeance, Bolton counseling caution, Umber demanding they rip lion guts now. Through the din, Rosalind rose, slender yet steady, and proposed dividing the host, leaving a defensive force to guard Winterfell, while Robb led a swift-moving cavalry spearhead, south through secret mountain passes only Crannogmen knew. The plan wed speed with surprise. Even Bolton nodded approval. Robb accepted, ordering preparations at once. In the gloaming the next day, Robb walked Winterfell's inner ward alone. Soaking quiet, snow blew in graceful eddies, coating fresh masonry. He paused where his father once stood teaching Bran archery, where he and Jon had raced ponies. Memory bent his shoulders a moment. Then footsteps crunched behind. Arya, cloaked, dagger at belt. She tilted chin. "You mean to ride tomorrow without me?" Robb opened mouth, but she cut him off. "I'm coming." He smiled, shaking head. "Winterfell needs you." "Winterfell will stand," she retorted. "Let me run messages scout ahead. I move quieter than any squire." He saw the fire in her, the same Ned once praised. At last he nodded. "You ride with the vanguard, under command of Howland Reed. Obey orders." She grinned lupine. Agreement forged. Night deepened. Fires crackled and hearths restored. Rosalind stood at the battlement, hand resting over womb's gentle curve, barely begun. Catelyn joined her, offering a fur cloak. They watched shimmering auroras dance above, rare light skipping across winter skies, green ribbons undulating. Rosalind whispered that maybe the old gods sang. Catelyn squeezed her hand. "They sing of renewal," she said. Somewhere in lower courtyard, Grey Wind raised a mournful howl, as though calling pack to the hunt. Robb strapped sword to hip, eyes reflecting aurora glow. The young wolf was on the move again, but now he carried more than vengeance in his heart. He carried the weight of a rebuilt castle, the love of a steadfast queen, the loyalty of a united North, and the faint, fluttering promise of the next generation, stirring under winter stars. The columns gathered before dawn. Frost-coated barding, breaths plumed white. Arya swung astride a swift chestnut, excitement masking fear. Robb rode to front, cloak billowing, Frey silver interwoven with stark gray upon his shoulders. A living symbol that oaths once broken could be mended stronger than before. Rosalind watched from gatehouse parapet, hand high in farewell, eyes bright with unshed tears, but lips curved in faith. Horns sounded, hooves thundered southward, fading into mist. Winterfell's gate groaned shut behind, but the echo rang not of closure but anticipation. Across silent courtyards, snowflakes settled on fresh-carved runes above the great hall doors. Winterfell resurgent. In the hush that followed, Rosalind descended stone steps, ready to steward the keep until her king returned. She crossed the yard where embers of pyres still smoldered, where blood had melted snow weeks past, and stooped to brush away a lost child's wooden direwolf toy half buried by drift. She placed it in her cloak pocket, with gentle care. The future, she knew, demanded guardians of small things as much as grand victories. She turned toward the heart tree to offer silent prayer for those riding into peril, and for the child quickening within her, who would one day learn the songs of northern snows, the roar of river barges, the courage of wolves, and the peace born of alliances kept. Below the ramparts, water in the moat froze solid as steel. Yet beneath that ice, a current still moved, quiet but unstoppable, carrying melted snows toward the distant sea. So too did fate flow beneath banners and ambition, shaping kingdoms in ways no mortal fully grasped. Somewhere beyond earshot, ravens beat wings against a leaden sky, bearing tales of the young wolf's resurgence, tales that would reach roaring hearths and shadowed councils alike. War would rage anew come spring, but its shape had changed. No longer a fractured north lashed by cold winds, but a single pack driving south, bound by blood, honor, and the soft-spoken strength of a Frey maiden, who now wore the dire wolf proudly upon her breast. And in Winterfell's quiet corners, children of small folk slept sound beneath new-patched roofs, unaware of the histories still being woven. A long night stretched ahead, but dawn, though distant, was certain, and its first light would break over battlements rebuilt by hands united. Until then, torches burned through the dark, tended by those who understood that victory is not merely seized on battlefield, but nurtured in the slow, steadfast labor of making broken things whole again. The siege of Winterfell had ended. The war for the realm pressed on. But in the hush of freshly fallen snow, amid the scent of pine and distant hearth smoke, hope hovered, fragile and fierce, like a lone white raven poised upon the parapet, wings spread for the long flight south. Okay. Gray dawn seeped into the barracks like thin milk, tinting every surface a color between ash and pearl. Robb Stark stood at the threshold of his command tent, adjusting the new wolf and twin cloak, clasp Rosalind had sewn for him the previous night. A pair of tiny mirrored towers, wrought in pale river silver, biting a strip of dire wolf gray wool. Snowflakes flickered past on the wind. Dawn's hush shivered with the tremor of horses stomping iced earth. Iron shoes striking sparks that died as quickly as hope in the hearts of the Lannister scouts, bound to witness this march and carry tidings south. The vanguard was lean by design, 300 mounted lancers from House Umber, 200 Frey outriders chosen for their silence rather than their swaggering pride, a talon of reed marsh runners perched like herons on their shaggy garrons, and a slim file of Stark guards personally loyal to the king. Arya rode with the reeds, wool hood low, longbow across her back in lieu of needle for this portion. Distance first, she declared, steel after. The mule she'd arrived upon had been traded, under Rosalind's watchful gaze, for a sure-footed chestnut gelding named Ember, whose patience matched her sly intensity. Ember whickered as she settled into the saddle. The sound vanished beneath the boom of a horn reverberating along Winterfell's new stone. The portcullis groaned upward, and the world beyond opened in a white hush, broken only by the low drone of wind through tattered branches. Robb led them out at a walk, letting hooves pack the thin crust of dawn ice before nudging the column into a trot that rattled spear hafts against kite shields. Snowmelt trickled beneath the frozen ruts, and pale sun edged over the pines like a coin from a miser's purse. Gray wind loped ahead, pluming breath, his fur frosted at the tips. When the last rider passed beneath the gate, Rosalind lifted a gloved hand from the parapet, till Robb's cloak pin glimmered back at her. Then the column dipped into the pine gloom and was gone. Winterfell settled into a rhythm of hammer and saw, stewed oats and salted pork, raven flights and mason chants. Rosalind oversaw the ration tallies alongside Maester Torrin, who recorded each cask of Frey flour that arrived over the King's Road on squealing ox sleds. Grain wagons, slowed by ice, assembled in the courtyard like patient mountains, each chalk marked with a horned sigil indicating Walder's price yet unpaid. 50 soldiers posted at the Twins for the coming campaign. Rosalind penciled the symbol of a small crown beside it. Payment noted. Words were oaths, but ledgers turned oaths into bread. Caitlin took charge of fortification, directing crews to reinforce the towers. Ramsay had half tumble, Between rotations she walked the inner courtyards with Arya's direwolf toy tucked in her sleeve, Rosalind's quiet sign that hope endures. Some nights, the wind caught beneath stone arches and carried ghostly laughter that reminded her of Bran climbing battlements, of Rickon's wooden sword tapping flagstones. She whispered their names into the draft. "Hold fast," she said. "We will find you." Stone listened, unmoved yet somehow kinder than before. South of the wall of pines, a low ridge separating Winterfell's valley from the open barrens, the vanguard traded steady pace for silence. Cranagman slid ahead, ghosting through cattail marsh and bare heather, mapping tracks where hoarfrost still disguised half-frozen pools. Lord Howland himself met them at dusk on an islet crowned by an oak, older than half the kingdoms. He greeted Robb with a hunter's clasp, all quiet eyes and reed cloak smelling of peat smoke. The tree filtered wind in slow sighs overhead. Beneath its roots Howland spread a scrap of cured deer hide bearing slanted runes drawn in river clay. Secret causeways crossing hills few cartographers recorded. Half-forgotten smugglers' trails veering north of the neck. Gullies too narrow for a Lannister baggage train to risk. Robb traced each with a gloved finger, memorizing bends and distances. Your scouts claim Tywin means to concentrate west of the Trident. Howland murmured, "But a river is a blade that cuts both warlords and wanderers. If he pushes his center toward the stone hedge crossing, he exposes flanks here. Tap, and here." Gray eyes flicked up to meet Robb's. The lion is patient as winter, but less clever beneath the water's surface. Robb nodded, folding the map. "We make for Hart's Grove. If we reach the ridge before his outriders know we've slipped the neck, he'll own the river, but not the roads." Arya listened from her perch on a fallen trunk. The names opened memories, Maester Luwin pointing to yellowed vellum maps, Ned telling how young Benjen once outraced the Umberhounds through Hartsgrove's mist and caught them all unaware. She pictured Joffrey's smug grin melting when ravens told how wolves prowled the riverlands again. A curl of satisfaction warmed her breath. Yet vengeance remained a distant ember. First, they must slip unseen. That night, they camped in a pocket hollow, muffled by powder snow. Fires burned low beneath canvas shields. Smoke channeled through reed chimneys Howland's folk made appear like frost-whitened shrubs. Robb dined on hard bread, dried apple slices, and a wedge of goat cheese provided by Mage Mormont at parting. Across the fire, Lord Greatjon gnawed venison ribs, grease glittering in his beard, while Frey outriders swapped bawdy jokes that drew wary glances from the reeds. The reeds answered with soft-voiced tales of bog whites and drowned kings that drained the color from Frey cheeks. When laughter faltered, Arya sang the quiet half of a Braavosi sea chant. She'd learned from sailors at Harrenhal's dock wing. The river folk hummed along, and for a moment the war paused between notes. Robb excused himself before the moon peaked. He stepped beyond the ring of lantern light into a stand of birch, ice fields glimmering where the moon touched them. He knelt, unbuckled his sword belt, and pressed the broad side of his blade into the snow. "Father," he began, words ghosting, "I carry the north now with more than fury. I carry the rivers packed. Guide my hand." He gripped the pommel until numbness spread. Gray wind padded up, nuzzled his shoulder, amber eyes luminous. Robb stroked dense fur and felt half his fear siphon away into the night. At dawn the vanguard advanced through frost-coated bramble glens, past cairns built by forgotten tribes, over a thread-thin creek whose surface spiderwebbed under their horses' weight. By midday pine gave way to bare beech rose, their bark splotched white where fungus chewed. Snow thinned, replaced by rotting leaf litter. The air smelled of cold earth and something sweet, sap perhaps, or the memory of spring. 2 leagues ahead, Frey outriders spotted smoke prints spiraling skyward. A Lannister scouting post. Robb halted in a dry gully, conferring with Howland and Greatjon. They chose subterfuge, infiltrate, seize maps, leave no survivors to carry news. Reed spear throwers flitted off, followed by Arya and Ember, under cloak of bark burlap, Frey Captain Walder Rivers bristled, "Let the girl stay," he hissed. But Robb silenced him with a glance. "She's faster than your 12 pickets together." The outpost perched on a stony knoll ringed with thorn. A makeshift palisade of half-split poles leaned inward like a drunkard's embrace. At its heart crackled a cook fire where 4 gold-cloaked men huddled over simmering stew. 2 more patrolled rampart shadows, bows loose. Arya and 3 crannogmen crawled on bellies through dry rush, snow clinging to cloaks. Wind shook brown leaves loose in flutters that masked the whisper of cloth. Arya counted breath. 4 in, hold, 4 out. She glimpsed the nearer sentry's boot heel grind grit atop the palisade walkway, saw the slack string of his bow, measured the yawning board pace. Her heart's drum quieted. At the crannogman's sign, a swift hand flutter, they rose. 2 darts, fletched with kingfisher plumes, thudded into the sentry's throat. He toppled soundlessly. Arya leapt the ditch, scrambled up the timber slats using notches as footholds, and landed catsoft behind the second sentry. Needle stung between neck and shoulder. Surprise locked his gasp to a wheeze. She eased him down, gaze unfaltering. Reed fighters poured through a low breach and fell upon the men at the cook fire. Knives flashed once, twice. The stew pot never spilled, though dark splattered snow around it. They hauled parchment satchels from a central tent, quick skimming seals. Arya recognized the lion but not the spider's sigil paired. Varys, or some other spymaster. The crannogmen set the palisade ablaze with pitch and retreated under swirling ash. Arya lingered a half-breath to warm her palms at the flames before sprinting back to Ember. The smell of roasted stew and scorched paper trailing her like a cloak. Robb studied the captured parchments that evening. They spoke of Phase 3 pacification, of Tywin's plan to secure grain tithes from the Riverlands by quartering troops in heron trenches. 100 men per mill under the Blackfish's nose, Great Jan snarled, while dispatching Adam Marbrand to harry any wolf spears that dared cross the Red Fork. But more intriguing were letters from King's Landing. Cersei urging haste in capturing Edmure Tully's new bride, Lady Alyssa Blackwood, whose rumored pregnancy might cement a Blackwood-Tully alliance inimical to Lannister control. Robb tapped the lines. Tywin gambles on tearing the Riverlords away one by one before we join them. Howland nodded. So we reach Riverrun first. Mid-march into Heartsgrove, they found the old growth gnarled like frozen waves. Mist clung low, muffling sound. Spore-flecked trunks rose skyward like pillars in some lost giant's court. Paths here twisted abruptly, patchy with brambles as thick as mailed wrists. Reed guides broke trail, marking trunks with subtle reed knots, while the Freys muttered of ghosts. Arya felt alive, half dreaming of a silent hunt. She and Ember circled the column's flanks, scanning for glints of helmet or arrow knock. Instead, she found stillness. Too deep. Pan signaled Howland, his gaze sharpened. The ambush fell just before dusk. Lannister light cavalry burst from the underbrush on both sides. 36 strong red and gold pennons snapping like sparks in the heavy air. Their horses kicked loam. Riders slashed with falchions aiming to break reins and scatter the wolves. But Robb's men had expected pursuit. Umber lancers wheeled instantly, forming a hornpoint wedge that drove between the attackers, splitting them in 2. Reeds from tree hollows launched barbed darts into neck joints. Arya loosed 3 arrows. First missed, second pierced a charger's shoulder, third slammed square into a rider's visor. Ember pivoted, hooves flashing. Arya drew needle for close finish. The rider toppled with a wet gurgle, red plume bending. Robb dueled the enemy captain amid swirling leaves. Cloak flared, longsword flickering. The captain, a Sir Jeremy Riker, Renly's defector, thrust low, but Robb parried and riposted with a backslash that severed helm strap. A second cut laid Ricker's chest open. As he fell, Robb wheeled horse away, already seeking next target. Grey wind lunged upon a dismounted spearman, knocking him into ferns where wolves' teeth ended struggle. 10 heartbeats later, silence returned, broken only by a distant owl and the hiss of a dying horse. The column buried their dead. 3 Freys, 2 Umbers, 1 Reed, in shallow cairns topped with river stones. Robb said words of farewell, but Arya saw grief shadow him deeper than numbers. Each life weighed more than Raven's ink. She helped pile rocks, whispering the names to keep them breathing in memory. Later, by fire, Greyjohn toasted the fallen with a skin of sour wine, bellowing that their spirits would ride storms and hurl bolts at lions. Reed singers countered with a low croon for marsh grasses bending over graves. Both songs twined into night. At Winterfell, Rosalind felt the slow weight of waiting. Maester Torrhen's ravens brought word of Tywin's musters, of Storm's End rallying banners to Tommen now that Stannis had retreated to Dragonstone licking wounds, of Ironborn raiders slipping along the western coast, harassing Manderley supply ships. Rosalind read each missive twice, then walked ramparts until the chill cleared her thoughts. She convened a midnight council with Lady Mage Mormont, Old Jory Glover, and Galbart Glover's wife Sibel. They drafted contingencies. Signal fires along the Barrowlands. Swift sled patrols to intercept raider landing parties. Evacuation tunnels reopened beneath the glass gardens. When dawn came, Rosalind supervised arrow fletching in the old glass house, its panes shattered by Ramsay's siege, but now patched with oiled parchment. Sunlight diffused amber across tables, where she and orphaned girls affixed swan feather veins with pine sap. Rosalind hummed a lullaby to keep their fingers steady. One girl, Myrna, asked if the queen missed home. Rosalind smiled. "Winterfell is my home now," she said. "And it will be yours as well if you tend it." Myrna nodded, straight-backed, as though given armor. 2 nights later, Walder Frey's youngest true-born daughter, Amaray, arrived at the gates with a small escort. A peace gift, she claimed, bearing news that Walder had rejected Tywin's gold. Yet Rosalind read tension in her sister's hunched shoulders. Over hot broth, Amaray confessed that sons Black Walder and Lane Lothar had disappeared 2 days earlier after receiving private orders sealed in red wax. They had ridden south with a handful of picked men, destination unknown but rumored east of the Green Fork. Rosalind's pulse tripped, Caitlyn's gaze sharpened. They dispatched a raven to Robb that very night. Southbound, Robb received the raven at a watering grove ringed by half-bare birch. His face hardened. "Walder hedges bets," he growled to Greyjohn. "If Black Walder sues Lion..." The twins turned traitor once more. Bolton offered to send his own outrider to shadow the Frey splinter band. Robb consented but paired the rider with a Reed spotter. No single man would carry mischief. They crossed out of Hartsgrove into open foothills, where frost receded under weak afternoon sun, revealing brittle brown grass prickling like quills. Ahead, the pale thread of the Blue Fork glimmered. Across that river lay fields dotted with hibernating orchards and thatched longhouses. Far beyond, river runs towers, and the weight of the realm's next decision. At a ruined toll bridge, they met riders bearing Tully trout. Sir Desmond Grell dismounted, cloak flapping, and knelt. "My king, River Run holds yet, though supplies thin. Lord Edmure fights fever, but stands." He spoke of scattered skirmishes. Marbrand's men harassing Blackwood orchards, Vance Holdings torched, but also of river partisans ambushing Lion convoys, with cunning gleaned from Blackfish warcraft. Grell's eyes glittered with fierce hope as he reported sightings of the Brotherhood, without banners, escorting refugees under freshly painted direwolf shields. Arya's heart leapt at mention of Gendry once glimpsed among them sharing blacksmith songs. Robb sent Grell ahead with orders to muster riverlords, promise relief within 6 days, and prepare for joint strike on Marbrand's siege lines. He spent that evening leaning over Howland's hide map, marking flanking valleys, ford depths, supply caches known only to smugglers. Arya watched from the shadows, noting his restless fingers, the small crease growing between his brows. When he straightened, she stepped forward. "Father used to rub the same spot when he worried," she said softly. Robb chuckled, rubbing the crease away. "Then I'll count that a sign I'm thinking clearly." Together, they studied stars flicking on above. Arya pointed out the sword belt of the ice bear, and told a tale Hodor once mumbled about a bear that guarded a key to spring. Robb listened, easing. 3 mornings later, the vanguard crested Slate Ridge, and beheld the riverland spread like a scroll. Muddy quilted fields, copses smoldering where war had brushed past. Thin smoke strands marking hearths still refusing to spare. Riverrun's island castle rose fanged at the confluence, banners drooping in damp wind. Leaping trout, direwolf, twin towers. Beyond, campfires of Marbrand's host bristled like embers. Robb ordered halt, and convened council, in a hollow half hidden by hawthorn. Greatjon favored frontal charge at dawn, while Bolton proposed night infiltration to open sluice gates and flood half the Lion trenches. Reeds offered to swim the moat and sabotage pontoon bridges. Robb considered each yet delayed verdict. He walked alone along the ridge until twilight. Feeling the weight of hearts behind him, he thought of Roslyn reading ledgers by candle, of unborn child fluttering like moth beneath her ribs. He thought of Arya's arrow striking true, of Frey oaths possible to keep, of his father's voice. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Tywin Lannister lay beyond those fields, perhaps not in body but in mind, weaving war as deftly as any smith braids steel. Robb could not slay that mind yet, but he could break its latest design. He returned to camp with a plan: divide and weave. At midnight, reed swimmers would slip downriver, cutting mooring lines and clogging pontoons with oil-soaked rush bundles. Bolton's picked riders would circle wide. Under truce banner, he proposed. Pale lips curved, drawing Marbrand to parley on the chance of Frey defection. While Lion officers wasted dark hours in wary discourse, Umber Lancers would drive the center at first hint of dawn, break trenches, and open a corridor for Trent's barges laden with Stark spears concealed beneath grain sacks. Grell would ignite beacon pitch on Riverrun's ramparts the moment pontoons burned. That would be the signal to loose the wool. Arya begged to join the reed swimmers. Robb refused. "Your gifts lie not in river mud," he said, resting hand on her shoulder. "I need you with the Lancers. Your eye." She bristled, then accepted with a curt nod. In truth, Robb wanted her where he could see her. Needle-sharp though she be, she was still his sister. Night deepened. Reeds melted into water, oil bladders tied to waists, moon smudged by low cloud. Bolton rode under white flag to Marbrand's grand tent, offering thin smiles and colder courtesy, speaking of Walder Frey's doubts, of highways open for negotiation. Marbrand, a careful man, listened behind iron-plated desk, flicking eyes to scribes cataloging each hint. Every minute thus pinned to parchment marked minutes not patrolling the river. Below, reed knives sawed anchor ropes rhythmic as an oarsman's chant. Oil seeped black into current, wicking along planks. Lantern signals winked upriver. Umber scouts ready. Arya sat astride Ember on ridge crest, fingering the new yew-bow Grell had gifted. Draw weight stout, grip wrapped in river eel leather. She felt tension hum down the bowstring into her bones. Dawn's rim waxed dull orange, smearing clouds. Somewhere distant a nightjar sang. Then silence cracked as a watchtower erupted in a spear of flame. Beacon pitch streamed gold against pre-dawn slate. Horns blared from Riverrun's walls. Marbrand leapt from map table just as Bolton's smile sharpened. Outside his tent the first of the pontoons bloomed fire, reeds chanting an old tongue as they slipped away. Lannister sentries scrambled for buckets, only to find ropes sliced, barrels punted into river. Then Umber Lancers roared down Slate Ridge like an avalanche, hooves drumming, pennons shredded to make them harder to see. Arya rode near the foremost file, arrow notched. She picked crimson-plumed helms and released. Shafts flew. Lions reeled. Ember bounded a trench, landing amid startled crossbowmen. Arya drew needle, carving space as reed darts hissed overhead. Gray wind hit the battlefield next to Robb, both launching into the breach. Stark spearmen rose from grain barges, drifting through torn pontoon lines, clambering to solid ground, shields interlocking. Grell's Riverlanders surged from Riverrun Gate, pikes glinting like new hope in sun now cresting. Battle became blur, clash of iron, shouts in half fog, the smell of churned clay and cordite pitch. Marbrand tried rallying cavalry on the west flank, but Bolton's riders intercepted, feigning collapse then wheel-flanking to slice girths and hamstring chargers. Lord Karstark, cresting the riverbank with a reserve wedge, spotted Marbrand himself near a fallen standard. He spurred forward, axe high, vengeance for sons roiling. Marbrand parried thrice, but Karstark's fury broke his guard. A backhand blow sheared helm and laid skull open. Lion archers faltered, seeing their commander fall, arrows flying too high. Spent in sky. By midday, the Red Fork ran thick with burning pontoon rubble and broken spears. Surviving Lannister companies formed a shrinking square, gold cloaks stained crimson and mud. Robb offered terms: lay down arms, march south unarmed, return no more for a year and a day. Many accepted. Some fought on and fell beneath Karstark's hungry axes. When horn blasts ceased, ravens scattered skyward, carrying tales of the river's turning tide. Riverrun's drawbridge lowered to receive the young wolf. Blackfish Brynden embraced nephew with rough grin. Tears glittered unshed in eyes of men who'd endured lean ales and leaner hopes. Inside the hall, Edmure, flushed with fever but upright, clasped Robb's arm, declaring that a trout leaps higher when the wolf swims beneath. Minstrels plucked strings, though many lacked strings still. Bread served was black with soot, but victory seasoned every bite. Arya washed blood from her hands at the well behind the stables. She surprised herself humming the Braavosi sea chant again, guttering notes drifting. Gendry stepped from shadows, face smudged with forge ash. "Heard you were dead," he said. She flicked water droplets at him. "You too, bull boy." They laughed. Awkward then easy. War-hammered children into strangers and strangers into kin. In the tower solar, Robb spread new maps across weather-scarred oak. Southern approach to Harrenhal. Grain depot rosters. Whispers of a debt-ridden house. Dairy willing to trade allegiance for relief. Bolton suggested striking Harrenhal before Tywin regrouped, but Howland counseled caution. The lion retreats to pounce, he warned. Raven from Roslin arrived describing Black Walder's disappearance. Robb scowled. "We tighten the leash," he said. "Dispatch fast riders to the twins, demand accounting." If Walder played false, Edmure's bride might host Tully-tipped siege engines at those gatehouses sooner than lion claws. 3 days of mending trenches and burying dead revealed a grim tally. 60 wolves fallen, 4 reeds swallowed by the river. 2 Frey outriders vanished during night patrol. Robb ordered prayers for each, stood by pyres until last sparks died. On the 4th dawn, he sent ravens across Storm Country Valley, summoning banners to Harrenhal. Scouts reported Tywin had withdrawn toward Harren trenches, but left garrison skeleton at Harrenhal's cracked shell. Perhaps bait, perhaps misdirection. Robb intended to take the fortress, liberate Riverland's prisoners rumored languishing within, then pivot west along God's Eye to outflank Tywin's muster. The column swelled with river lords. Blackwoods painting ancient weirwood on shields. Malisters bearing silver eagle. Norrymen in patchwork sealskin who claimed to smell snows returned 3 days hence. Riverrun's armories busied under smiths stoking forges with fallen lion steel, refashioning enemy blades into wolf fangs. Gendry joined them, hammer ringing hope into new iron. Before the march, Robb knelt at Riverrun's godswood with Arya, Brynden, and Edmure. Leaves here were copper rather than red, remnants of autumn lingering stubbornly. Robb asked the old gods to guard Roslin and the child unborn, to temper Walder Frey's whims, to shepherd Ned's bones home. He asked for snow to hold until Harrenhal's walls fell. Wind answered with hush, leaf edges trembling. That night, torches snaked across dark fields as the host formed. Bells chimed farewell. Arya rode near Robb again, Ember's ears twitching. She sensed currents deeper than river. The weight of alliances, trust knotted by marriage yet fraying under unseen strain. The swirl of lion gold whispering north, the crack of winter's approach, but also the warmth of wolves together, of families mending. She straightened in the saddle. The army moved at dawn like a tide of gray and blue banners rippling. Direwolf, Trout, Twin Towers, Blackwood Raven. Behind them, River Run's repaired drawbridge creaked into place, and the rivers sighed around stone foundations, as if acknowledging the memory of broken oaths now reforged. Far north, Rosalind stood again upon Winterfell's parapet, eyes scanning the pale horizon. She touched her belly, felt nothing yet but imagined heartbeat. Snowflakes drifted. Somewhere beyond those flakes, ravens winged news of victory. Yet she prayed not for triumph alone, but for endurance, that hearts remain supple, that river alliances flow steady, that the twins stand firm. She exhaled, breath curling. Her hand brushed the wooden direwolf still in cloak pocket, corners worn smooth. Small thing, big hope. Time marched, slower than armies yet as unstoppable. Tywin Lannister studied reports by candlelight in Harrenhal's tower of the Widow's Wail. Pontoon bridges burned, Marbrand slain, Frey envoys silent. He steepled fingers, calculating. So the wolf keeps the river, he murmured. Then we starve him of snow. He summoned raven quills, scratching orders for Sir Gregor Clegane. Raise granaries from Pink Maiden to Hog's Watch, burn vineyards, salt fields. Winter would feed no wolf this year. Ravens beat south, carrying doom. Others beat north, carrying resolve. Somewhere amid the crossing of wings, destiny threaded needles through ambitions. Rosalind stitching more than cloaks. Arya stringing more than arrows. Robb weaving more than strategy. He wove a realm's fragile chance that alliance once scorned could outlast the winter. And within the quiet chambers of Winterfell's rookery, a lone white raven preened under torchlight, meaning to fly at next solstice, bearing a single truth: the season was about to turn. Yet on battlefields season mattered less than hearts. And hearts, it seemed, could thaw even the longest winter, if tended by fire and faith enough to keep oaths alive. So marched the young wolf. So whispered rivers. So watched God's wood leaves that never truly slept, dreaming of springtime yet to come.